If you enjoy this compilation of Reddit horror stories, consider dropping a like and subscribe. This would greatly help my new channel and motivate me to read and create these videos. Thank you, and enjoy. It started about a week ago. I'd hear this faint scratching sound coming from under my bed just as I was drifting off to sleep. I tried ignoring it, chalking it up to the old pipes in my apartment, or maybe the wind rattling something outside. But the sound didn't go away. It got worse. By the third night, I was too curious, or maybe too freaked out, to let it slide. I grabbed my phone, switched on the flashlight, and crouched down to look. My heart pounded harder than I cared to admit, but there was nothing there. Just dust, a few crumpled receipts, and an old sneaker I thought I'd lost months ago. I laughed at myself, feeling stupid for even checking. Still, the sound continued, always at the edge of my hearing, like tiny claws scraping at the floorboards. Then, the smell started. It was faint at first, like damp earth. But by the fifth night, it was stronger, putrid, like rotting meat. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I told my landlord. He brushed me off, saying, "It's probably a dead mouse in the walls. Happens all the time in old buildings." That night, I shoved a towel under the crack of my bedroom door and sprayed air freshener until my room reeked of cheap lavender. I thought I'd handled it. But then it touched me. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I was half asleep, curled on my side, when I felt it. Something cold and slimy brushing against my ankle, tugging at the edge of my blanket. I shot upright, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in bed, to not acknowledge it. But I couldn't help myself. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and pointed the light under the bed. Again, nothing. "Get it together," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. The next day, I did everything I could to distract myself. Cleaned the apartment, called some friends, went for a jog. But when night fell, the dread returned. I didn't want to go to bed, but I couldn't stay awake forever. I locked my bedroom door, left the overhead light on, and crawled under the covers, phone clutched tightly in my hand. At some point, I drifted off. When I woke, it was still dark, but something felt off. The smell was stronger, so overwhelming it made my stomach churn. My light was off, though I was sure I'd left it on, and then I heard it, a whisper, faint, garbled, but unmistakable.
"I'm Razor."
My chest tightened. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The voice came again, soft and raspy.
"I'm waiting."
I gripped my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light shook as I pointed it at the floor, forcing myself to look. This time, something looked back. 2 eyes, cloudy, milky white, stared at me from the shadows. A grin spread beneath them, impossibly wide, revealing jagged, yellowed teeth. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the headboard. My breath hitched as the thing slid halfway out from under the bed. Its limbs were long, too long, bending in ways that didn't seem possible. Its skin was pale and slick, stretched, taut, over its bony frame.
"You've been so fun to watch."
It crooned, voice like nails on glass. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't listen. I could only sit there, frozen, as it crept closer, its twisted smile never faltering.
"You never check the right way."
It said, giggling, the sound wet and gurgling.
"Oh, it's the flashlight, never your hands."
It reached out. a spindly arm stretching toward me, and that's when I realized its other hand was already gripping my ankle. The last thing I saw before it yanked me under was the grin widening, splitting its face in two.
No one should enter the bed anymore. I'm still here waiting for you.
The woods behind our house always felt alive, but not in a peaceful, nature is beautiful kind of way. No, there was something wrong about them. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches like skeletal hands reaching out. The deeper you went, the more the air seemed to grow thick, suffocating, like something was pressing down on you, waiting. My parents were always strict about us going too far, but that night, Ben and I decided to push our luck. Summer nights get boring, and we wanted something more exciting. Camping out in the woods felt like a rite of passage, especially when our friends weren't around to stop us. We set up the tent in a clearing, not too far from the house, but far enough to feel isolated. Ben was nervous, I could tell. His eyes kept darting around, scanning the dark gaps between the trees, but he wouldn't admit it. We lit a small fire, roasted marshmallows, and tried to act like it was just another camping trip. But there was a heaviness in the air, like the woods were holding their breath. After an hour or two, the fire had dimmed to a glow. The silence was so thick, it felt like it was squeezing the life out of everything. I lay back, staring at the stars, trying to relax. That's when I heard it. A snap. A twig. Somewhere off in the darkness. It wasn't an animal noise. It was deliberate. Slow. I sat up, my heart thudding. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Ben nodded. His face had gone pale, eyes wide. He didn't move, just stared into the black void between the trees, where the firelight couldn't reach. I shone the flashlight in the direction of the sound, but the beam flickered weakly, as if the darkness was thicker than it should be. Nothing. Just trees. "Maybe it's just the wind," I said, but my voice trembled. Ben was frozen, staring at something just beyond the trees. "I saw someone," he whispered. My stomach dropped. "What?" Ben's voice was barely audible. There was someone out there, watching us." I felt my chest tighten. I scanned the trees again, but there was nothing. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, we heard it. My mother's voice. Ben shot up, eyes wide, trembling. The voice was unmistakable, but it was off, like someone had recorded her and slowed it down, distorting it. The words dragged through the air, each syllable stretching unnaturally. "She's not out here," I said quickly, trying to pull him back, but he was already on his feet. "I heard her," he insisted, tears welling up in his eyes. "She's calling me." Before I could stop him, he ran toward the trees. I stumbled after him, my flashlight flickering in and out. The voice called again, this time louder, closer. But it didn't sound human anymore. It was twisted, garbled, like something trying to mimic her but not getting it right. We crashed through the trees, the branches slashing at our arms and faces. I caught up to Ben just as he reached a small clearing, panting, his breath coming in frantic gasps. That's when we saw it. At the edge of the clearing, something crouched low, barely visible in the shadows. It looked like a person at first, roughly the shape of one anyway, but its limbs were wrong. Too long, too thin, like they'd been stretched out. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, its mouth open far too wide, grinning. It was wearing my mother's face, but it wasn't her. The skin hung loosely, sagging, as if someone had peeled it off and draped it over something else. Its eyes were wrong too, solid black, empty, like it was staring at us through the mask.
Ben, come here!
It croaked, its voice warping, struggling to form the words. The skin on its face twitched as it spoke, like it didn't quite fit. Ben stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. I grabbed his arm, yanking him back, but he wouldn't move. "Mom," he whimpered. The thing took a step forward, its bones cracking audibly with each movement, the skin slipping, stretching over its misshapen form. "No," I whispered, pulling Ben harder. "We have to go." But Ben just stared, shaking, as the thing mimicked my mother's voice again, more desperate now, more broken. "Ben, come here." It started to crawl toward us, its limbs bending the wrong way, its hands, long, jagged fingers, dragging through the dirt, pulling itself closer. Its black eyes never blinked, never wavered. I screamed, finally breaking Ben's trance, and we bolted back toward the tent. The sound of something massive crashing through the trees followed us, its voice garbling and warping into a series of guttural sounds that no human throat could make. We didn't stop until we reached the house, but even then, as we slammed the door and locked it, we could still hear it, scratching. Low, raspy breathing, just outside. The next morning, our parents didn't believe us, and we refused to go back into the woods. But some nights, when everything's quiet, we still hear it at the edge of the trees, scratching. I'm not really sure how to explain this without sounding crazy, but something happened last night, and I feel like I need to share it. I'm sitting here at my computer, typing this on Reddit, hoping someone else has experienced something similar. I wasn't supposed to be alone. My mom had to leave in the middle of the night to pick up my little sister. She got sick at her friend's sleepover, so Mom left around 11:30 p.m., told me she'd be back in an hour or so, and said I could stay up a little later. I thought it'd be a breeze. After all, I'm old enough to stay home by myself, and I've done it plenty of times before. At first, I just watched cartoons to kill the time, but around midnight, I started feeling a bit uneasy. You know that feeling when you think someone's watching you? Yeah, that. I glanced at the window, half expecting to see something, but there was nothing. The street outside was quiet, just the shadows from the trees swaying in the dim light of the street lamp. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. I kept watching TV, but then I heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap coming from the kitchen. It wasn't regular, like water dripping. It felt deliberate. At first, I thought maybe it was just the house settling, but then I realized the tapping was coming from the back door. My heart started racing as I muted the TV and crept towards the kitchen. As soon as I got close, the tapping stopped. I stood there for a second, listening. It felt eerie, like the house had gone completely silent. Just to be safe, I flicked on the back porch light and peered out. Nothing. The yard was empty, and I felt ridiculous for even getting spooked. I went back to the living room, determined to shake off the creepiness, but then I heard it again. Tap, 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 this time from the window above the kitchen sink. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to check it out. I walked over, trying to act brave, but my heart was pounding like crazy. I pulled back the curtain, but there was nothing out there, just darkness. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move across the yard, something fast. I froze, staring into the shadows, but it was gone before I could make it out. Panic surged through me. I checked my phone for a signal. Nothing. I wanted to call my mom, but I was cut off from the outside world. Trying to stay calm, I locked the back door and double-checked every window. As I was about to settle back down, I heard it again, the back door rattling. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a knock. It was the handle turning, as if someone was trying to get in. I was paralyzed with fear, staring at the door. Maybe it was Mom, I thought, but the way it rattled didn't feel right. I could feel the weight of whatever was out there pressing down on me. I ran to the door, checked the lock again, and threw a chair in front of it. My heart raced as the rattling turned to banging, harder and louder, as if someone was getting desperate. I screamed, but I was alone in the house. And then, footsteps. They weren't outside. They were coming from upstairs. I've never felt so terrified in my life. No one else was supposed to be here, and yet, the creaking sound echoed down the hallway. Each step, deliberate. Each pause, haunting. I grabbed the landline phone and dialed my mom's number, but there was no dial tone. I could feel panic rising in my chest. The footsteps grew closer, and I didn't know what to do. I bolted to the bathroom, locked the door, and crouched down on the floor. Every little creak sent jolts of fear through me. I was convinced I was imagining things, that I was just being paranoid. But then it stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. I pressed my ear against the door, listening for any sound, and then I heard it. A voice, low and distorted. It whispered my name. I scrambled back, heart racing.
Let me in.
I couldn't breathe. The doorknob started to rattle, slowly at first, then faster. I backed away, tears streaming down my face. The voice came again, clearer this time. Please, let me in. That's when I finally lost it. I could feel the door shaking as whatever was on the other side tried to push its way in. I don't know how long I stayed in there, terrified, but eventually I heard my mom's voice calling from downstairs. When she got home, she found me huddled in the bathroom, crying. I tried to explain everything that happened, but she thought I just had a nightmare. She couldn't understand. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. Something was in the house with me last night, and I can't shake this feeling that it's still out there. So here I am, sharing my story on Reddit, hoping someone else has been through something similar. If you have, please let me know. I can't shake the fear that whatever it was, it's still watching, still waiting for me to be alone again. I don't really know where to begin because it all seems so ridiculous now. But at the time, it felt as real as you and me talking. It started about a month ago when I moved into this old Victorian house. You know, one of those places that look charming from the outside, but creaks and groans like it's haunted by every single person who ever lived there. I rented the place because it was cheap and I needed somewhere quiet to focus on my writing. The owner didn't mention anything unusual about the house. No tragic history, no weird deaths, just an old house. But I should have known. I should have felt it from the second I walked in. The air was thick, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me just a little bit. At first, I brushed it off as my nerves. Moving into a big, empty house all alone, after all, can make anyone a little jumpy. But then, the mirror showed up. It was in the attic, covered in dust and leaning against the wall. The frame was this dark, polished wood, intricate with carvings that looked like vines. Or maybe they were snakes. Hard to tell. I remember running my fingers over the carvings, feeling how cold they were, even though the attic was stifling hot. The glass was hazy, so dirty I could barely see my reflection at first. But something in me told me not to wipe it clean, like I didn't want to see myself in that mirror. Not really, but curiosity won out, as it always does. I grabbed an old cloth and started wiping away the grime. That's when I noticed it. The air shifted, not like a breeze, but the atmosphere in the room changed. It got heavier, colder. My skin prickled, but I ignored it. Stupidly, I ignored it. When I finally cleared the glass, there I was, staring back at myself. But I wasn't just staring. It felt like the reflection was off, like it was me, but not me. The eyes, my eyes, were darker, hollow, and the reflection didn't move in sync with me. Not exactly. There was a delay, just the smallest lag, but enough to notice. I should have walked away then, should have covered the damn thing back up and forgotten about it. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at myself. And that's when I heard it. At first, it was so faint. I thought it was just the wind or the house settling. But no. It was coming from the mirror. A whisper. No, more like a voice trying to whisper but being choked back. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, and leaned in closer, stupidly trying to make out what it was saying. It was my name, whispered so faintly, but it was my name. I jerked back, but the reflection, it didn't. My reflection just stayed there, watching me, eyes dark, mouth slightly open like it was waiting for something. I ran downstairs, slammed the door to the attic shut, and tried to shake it off. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks, the stress of moving, maybe too much caffeine. But the whispers, they didn't stop. At first, it was only when I was near the attic. I could hear it, even through the door. My name, over and over again. But then it started at night, when I was lying in bed, my heart pounding in the silence. The voice would seep into my dreams, pulling me back to that damn mirror. I'd see myself, standing in front of it, only it wasn't me. It was the reflection, staring at me with those hollow eyes, whispering my name, and each time I'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. A few days ago, I found the attic door wide open in the morning. I never opened it. I never even went near it after that first day. But there it was, yawning like a mouth, waiting. The whispers were louder now. I could hear them even when I was downstairs, like they were crawling through the walls, trying to find me. My name, and something else. I don't know what, but I could feel the words clawing at my mind, trying to pull me back to that mirror. I haven't gone up there since, but I know it's waiting for me. Whatever is in that mirror wants me to come back, and I'm scared that if I do, I won't be the one looking out anymore.